Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that shit, suicidalists. We are currently balls deep in our war on Christmas, and what better way to wage our blasphemous war than to ring in the holidays with a Christmas-themed episode of Cinema S. This week, we are going to take a look at 5 horror movies that have no shame, a series of slasher flicks and monster movies where jolly old Saint Nick was last seen wielding an axe. So, spike some eggnog, light the Yule log, and get comfortable because Christmas has never been bloodier. Rare Exports is a 2010 film out of Finland that's based on a couple of short films from director Jalmari Helander. I will link to those short films down in the description. Make sure that you watch them. They are very, very good. They are very funny. But Rare Exports feature concerns the fate of a group of reindeer herders in the Arctic Circle whose livelihood is threatened when a scientist orders the excavation of a nearby mountaintop by explosives in order to open what he considers to be the world's largest burial mound, so that he can remove the burial mound's inhabitant. Its inhabitant, a great beast of legend, turns out to be still alive, and naturally, this being a horror movie, its inhabitant escapes. These herders seek to capture it and ransom it back to the scientist, and it turns out that that great beast of legend is Santa Claus. This movie's premise is so goofy, and it seemed to come out at a time when there was a lot of these killer Santa movies coming out, but Hellander's movie is so much more than it seems to be. It's also very well made, it's extremely enjoyable, very, very original. Of all of the Christmas-themed horror movies, and there's actually a lot of them, it might just be the best of them all. This movie, as of this recording, is streaming on Netflix. Do you really want to subject yourself to another 24-hour marathon of A Christmas Story? Watch Rare Exports instead. Speaking of A Christmas Story, you can make a pretty strong argument that Black Christmas is the original, official, first slasher movie of all time. But that opens a really crazy-ass can of worms and leads to a nasty discussion that I'd rather not have at this point. It's also really well-worn material at this time. But Black Christmas was directed by Bob Clark, was released in 1974, and has been darkening doorsteps in this time of cheer ever since. In Black Christmas, an unseen murderer stalks women living in a sorority as they stay over at university over the Christmas break, and one by one they're knocked off in particularly nasty fashion, and, well, that's about it, kind of. Since its release, Black Christmas kind of feels a little bit formulaic because there's been this whole legacy of slasher movies to follow, but it really isn't, and there's a lot more at work here, and slasher fans tend to rank it pretty high among other Christmas-themed slasher movies because it's a real champ in the face of some really lame movies. For whatever reason, it's become very popular to set your slasher movies during a holiday, a time of import, like Halloween and shit. And for whatever reason, the Halloween-themed slasher movies have always been the weakest of the bunch, but Black Christmas is a standout picture among them. It's really unpleasant and dreary. And I so badly want to talk about the resolution here because the ending is really something, but I just don't want to spoil it in case you haven't seen it. It's such a bummer. And it's always seemed to me that Bob Clark made A Christmas Story 10 years later as if to apologize for Black Christmas. Do these Christmas-themed horror movies have to be such serious, dreary affairs? I say to thee, nay. And to prove my point, I give to you Santa's Sleigh, starring former professional wrestling phenomenon Bill Goldberg. In Santa's Sleigh, Santa Claus is literally the Antichrist who loses a bet to an angel during a curling match. The terms of the bet involve putting on the red suit and going around the world for 1,000 years spreading Christmas cheer until the curse is broken in 2005. And guess when this movie was released? So, with Santa's curse broken, he is free to raise hell in slapsticky fashion, and it's up to a couple of teenagers and their crazy-ass grandfather to stop his murderous rampage. So it is silly and fucking stupid, but even these movies have a place in the pantheon of horror. It's just a little too spoofy to appeal to the Tromaville crowd. It even has a little bit of crossover with that other wrestling horror movie, WrestleManiac, starring Rey Mysterio Jr. as Santa borrows some of Goldberg's signature ring moves, in case you'd forgotten that he was a professional wrestler at one time. I'm sometimes reminded of the movies of Joe Dante, and other times I'm reminded of the sort of cheapo Canadian exploitation movies that were made in the 80s. Santa's Sleigh never really takes itself seriously, and neither should you. Ever wonder what you would get if you crossed Santa Claus with Freddy Krueger? You would get Sint, which was released here in the States as Saint Nick. It seemed like 2010 was a really big year for filling in the backstory of Santa Claus. I mean, even I wrote an article about it. All of a sudden, there's all these horror movies where Santa Claus is the bad guy, and all these hipster corners of the world are hosting Krampusnacht on December 5th for really vague reasons, and Sint really parties down with this idea. See, in 1492, Santa Claus is at the head of a murderous gang in the Netherlands, and when the people of the villages have decided that they've had enough of that bullcrap, they all gang together and kill them all. So now, for really mystical reasons, on December 5th, the ghost of Santa Claus and his murderous gang of Black Peters rise from the grave to terrorize and kill the living. So you've got this mostly heroic cast out to thwart the undead Santa Claus and his gang, as well as this sort of ongoing conspiracy to cover up the occasion of murderous ghosts in the Netherlands. It's all pretty ridiculous. Sint has a really grisly premise. It's kind of a black comedy as well. While it's not a great movie, it's perfectly functional. It also saves me the trouble of loading up this list with a number of American slasher movies where the killer is just some asshole in a Santa Claus costume. Speaking of assholes in Santa costumes, I bet you were wondering if Silent Night, Deadly Night was going to wind up on this list. Well, wonder no more. Silent Night, Deadly Night was definitely not the first of the Christmas-themed horror movies to come out, but it was definitely the first one of them to generate some controversy because of its subject matter. Now, the setup of this movie is fairly typical. Billy Chapman, at 5 years old, witnesses the murder of his parents at the hands of a killer in a Santa suit. And this comes hot on the heels of his crazy grandfather explaining to him that not only does Santa Claus reward good girls and boys, he punishes the naughty ones. So, Billy and his infant brother are thrust into a truly terrible Catholic orphanage where they're subjected to all sorts of abuse until he's shat out into the world when he's 18. And he tries his best to hold it together until he just snaps at a Christmas party, goes on a murderous rampage in a Santa suit, punishing the naughty. Now, for such a shitty slasher movie, and Silent Night, Deadly Night is pretty shitty, it is jammed, it is packed with Freudian and Jungian psychology. Slasher movies have always been obsessed about the anxieties of sex, but this movie goes positively apeshit with this idea. You've probably already seen Silent Night, Deadly Night by this point, but if you have not, make it a point to see it because it is really, really funny. Just avoid the sequels because they are fucking terrible. So Merry Christmas, motherfuckers. There's 5 of a whole shitload of Christmas-themed horror movies to subject yourself to this holiday season instead of watching A Christmas Story again. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But seriously, on the rails, from me to you, suicidalists, happy holidays. So is there anything on this list that I missed? Are there any must-see Christmas-themed horror movies that you love that you feel like I really gotta see? Drop me a line, leave it down in the comments. And right now is a good time to join us on the Suicidal Facebook for more updates. Follow me on Twitter for random bullshit, sort of narrations of my day. And for other stuff that I can't seem to find a home for, random things, follow me on Tumblr. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next Friday.